It is the thing that shows up before you do, before your presence shows up, before what you plan to say in the room shows up, and that is your brand. Branding is now becoming more of a leadership skill. So not something that you might do, but when you think about how people see you, how they think about you, what they believe about you, your capabilities, your impact, your receipts are your leadership brand. The easy thing for me to do would have been to just say, hey, I'm just gonna sit back and let this blow over. I'm gonna just give this some time. I'm gonna put my head down. I'm gonna work hard. I'm gonna stick to, what I'm supposed to be doing. If you are not cultivating your leadership brand, you're giving someone else permission to do it for you. And it became very clear just from all of the conversations and the stories that were coming back to me. I'm like, I have to own my own narrative in this instance. I have to be proactive in bringing this up in conversation because I started back interviewing. Your leadership brand isn't self-promotion. It is self-awareness that you are able to express through intention. Welcome to the Let's Thrive Together podcast, where we are sharing real stories of real leaders thriving not only in their career in business, but also in your life. I'm your host, Brittany N, keynote speaker, author of Thrive Through It, and the CEO of Career Thrivers, where we work with executives and organizations to build bold leaders and resilient teams. If I asked you right now, on a scale from 1 to 10, how strong is your leadership brand? Most people would just guess, but you don't have to. We've created the leadership brand assessment to give you an actual score on where you stand, your impact, your visibility, and the gap between those two. Because that gap, the distance between what you've built and what the world actually sees, that's where your influence is hiding, and that's where your income is hiding too. That's where your next opportunity is waiting. And it only takes 3 minutes. It's absolutely free, and it'll tell you exactly where to focus next. So take the assessment now at scoremyleadershipbrand.com. Welcome back to the show. I am so excited about this episode because whether you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening in on Apple Podcasts or wherever you tune in to Let's Thrive Together, we are getting into a topic, a conversation today that is the one thing that walks into the room before you do. It is the thing that shows up before you do, before your presence shows up, before your outfit shows up, before your smile shows up, before what you plan to say in the room shows up, and that is your brand. So we're going to talk today about why branding is actually now becoming more of a leadership skill, and how you, whether you are an entrepreneur, whether you are an emerging leader, whether you are an executive at an organization, can really hone into some just very clear, but also foundational branding principles that can help you thrive in your business and in your career. So I hope you're ready. I hope you got something out where you can take a few notes because I want to make this really, really, really practical to you. So I'm going to use the term leadership brand in this episode. And I want to share with you why you'll hear me say leadership brand, why you'll hear Career Thrivers, if you go to our website or you check out our work, why you'll see the language of leadership brand, because we believe firmly, it's why I'm doing this episode with you today, that branding is now becoming more of a leadership skill, right? So not something that is something that you might do, but when you think about how people see you, how they think about you, what they believe about you, your capabilities, your impact, your receipts, right? Those things in a concise phrase in 2 words are your leadership brand. And it goes beyond just you personally, right? So that's why we see leadership branding as a step above personal branding, because this isn't only about what's happening in your personal life or how you personally think, but this is also about your impact as a leader, the inspiration that you share in cultivating other leaders, right? The other thing that we find, especially working one-on-one with leaders on their leadership brand, is when we talk about leadership branding, it takes some of the pressure off, right? Let me know if you've ever felt this way. Have you ever felt like, you know what? I just want to get the work done. I just want to focus on my performance. I just want to let my work speak for me. Right? I don't want to be talking about myself. I don't want to have to be showing up online, creating videos, taking photos, all of those sorts of things, right? Most people oftentimes, especially executives in the corporate space, nonprofit space, government space, get a little bit of pause because they're like, I don't want everything just to be about me, right? But this isn't just about you, it's about your leadership. So really it's about the impact that you're making on other people, right? So that's why we like to think of this as leadership branding. But in this current era, branding is no longer just something for marketers or for influencers or for entrepreneurs. It's actually something for every single leader. And so I want to share that with you today. This is not about aesthetics. This is about alignment. So I'll tell you a quick story. Before I founded Career Thrivers, I spent 12 years at Pfizer. And one of the pivotal moments in my career happened in 2017. I can remember the day like it was yesterday. It was a Friday. It was about 15 to 20 minutes after 5 o'clock. So maybe like 5:20. And I'm at home and I get a phone call and I recognize the number. So my heart started beating a little bit faster. I'm like, okay, do I stand? If I stand up, I feel like my nervous energy, I'm gonna be pacing the floor. So, okay, let me sit down. So I'm sitting down at the chair next to my bed in my bedroom and I answer the phone. I pick up the phone. It is the hiring manager of the brand that I had applied for. Now I'm gonna pause the story, give you a little bit of context. So at this point in my career at Pfizer, I had been in sales up until this point. I wanted to make this transition into marketing. And every person told me, literally every single person that I talked to in my, work in my individual development plan or IDP for corporate speak, right? Doing the things that you do to develop for the next role. Everyone told me, Brittany, is probably gonna take a few tries, right? For you to put your name in the hat, go through the process to make this transition from sales into marketing. So I'm like, okay, this very interesting role comes along. It's the consumer HCP marketing team for a brand that used to be the brand that I would throw out when people had no idea what Pfizer was. So whenever someone would ask the inevitable question of, what do you do? And I'd say, I work for Pfizer. If I kind of started to see their eyes glaze over like they didn't know what that is, I'd say, oh, the company that makes Viagra. So this was that brand. It was the Viagra marketing team. And of course, now since 2020 or through the pandemic, everyone knows Pfizer, right? Because of the vaccine. But at that time, that was the association that I would make. I share that to say, right? The brand name Viagra is just as strong as the company, the parent company name, Pfizer. So this was a massive opportunity, right, to work on an iconic brand. And I get this call because I've gone through this interview process that I'm thinking, get my name in the hat. It's my first shot. Long story short, the hiring manager leads into the conversation. She says, Brittany, I didn't want to hold you over another weekend. We've made a decision about the role. And I am happy to inform you. And before she can even get the words out, I did probably the most unprofessional thing that you can do when you get the call that you've just earned the job with the hiring manager. I screamed on the phone. I was so excited. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got the job. I was living in Chattanooga, Tennessee at the time. The role was in New York. I'm a Nashville native, so I'm 2 hours down the road in Chattanooga. At this particular time, I'm also about 7 weeks from my wedding. So I'm 7 weeks from my wedding. So I hang up the phone with the hiring manager. We're so excited. Stay tuned. We'll send you, I'm going to send you the offer over now, but we'll send you some additional details on Monday and we'll get going with your transition, all the things, right? You'll see the offer, we'll be ready to move forward with next steps next week. And so I'm like, okay, I hang up the phone. First person I call is my fiance. Now, before I make this call, thinking to myself, I'm like, okay, I know I need to call him and share the news, but I'm also a little bit tempted to call the wedding planner because I'm thinking like, okay, we are going to switch out the cocktail theme for the wedding to be New York theme because we're about to move to New York. I'm so excited. Get on the phone, share the news with him. He's excited. We go through, get the offer, go through the details. We've got about a week I have about a week to make a decision to sign the offer. And through that process, right, like anyone knows, you get the full set of details when you get the offer. And it was just this combination of right role, wrong time. Because at that very same time, my fiance got a full ride to go back to get his MBA to grad school in Atlanta. So just for the purpose of context with the geography, I'm in Chattanooga. He's in Nashville. He gets a full ride to go to school in Atlanta, and I have a new big job offer in New York. We're getting married in 7 weeks. So I decided to turn down the job. And it was through this experience that I learned the power of branding. At that particular time, I did what any high performer at a Fortune 100 company does when you are applying for a highly visible, highly competitive role. I lined up my troops, right? Or to say it another way, right? I had about 15 to 20 advocates that were, mentors, sponsors, people that put their name out there and said, Brittany is the person for the role. Here's the recommendation letter. Here's the email. Here's the quick text message for people that had a closer relationship with the hiring manager. So this wasn't just me that made a decision not to take the role. I was also putting not only my reputation on the line, but the reputation of a lot of other leaders. And so I had some decisions to make. Right? I had some decisions to make about how to navigate this conundrum that I was now in. And I'm sharing this story with you because it's oftentimes through disruptive or challenging moments like this that we understand the power of brand. And I want to give you the opportunity to really grasp the power of it and to put the foundational strategies into play before you get to moments like this, or at least to help you be able to thrive through them, right? Like, okay, what do I do? Because there are all these stories that are floating around why I did not take this particular role, right? And the hiring manager was clear, right? It was a matter of timing and relocation package and all of these specifics around the nuances of the offer. And the fact that, personally speaking, some unexpected things came through with going back to school, full scholarship, all the things. And it just wasn't the right time for me to try to make this move. Well, I had some people that understood and said, we get it, right? There'll be more opportunities. This isn't the end of the road for you. And then I had others that felt the exact opposite. I will always remember I had a mentor that looked me in my eyes and said, Brittany, you've committed career suicide here. And I was like, what? I had never even heard those two words put together. So I had to learn very quickly how to, and when I say quickly, over the course of about 18 months, really what this world of leadership branding actually looked like. Because I had to decide, hey, am I going to sit back and let other people share my story? And I know I'm sharing a relatively extreme example, or at least an example of like, hey, tell me a time when, you made a hard decision or you had a career failure, or however you might want to frame it. But I think that this also is relevant just for how you're navigating your own career or business journey, because the easy thing for me to do would have been to just say, hey, I'm just going to sit back and let this blow over. Right? I'm going to just give this some time. I'm going to put my head down. That's what we say, right? I'm going to put my head down. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to stick to, what I'm supposed to be doing. And I'm going to let the chips kind of fall where they may, let the dust settle a little bit. And then, I'll come back and do the thing. Well, I tried that for a little bit, and then it became abundantly clear. And I share this often, that if you are not cultivating your leadership brand, you're giving someone else permission to do it for you. And it became very clear just from all of the conversations and the stories that were coming back to me, like just stuff that had nothing to do with the reason why I turned the job down, right? So I'm like, okay, I really got to own my narrative. Right? I have to own my own narrative in this instance. I have to be proactive in bringing this up in conversation, because I started back interviewing. Because after, we got married, he went off to school, and we had a very clear plan at that point to move to New York, right? To be able to move to New York together. And we had a timeline and a roadmap for that. And so I knew that, hey, there was nothing about the role or this aspiration that was wrong or had changed for me. I still wanted to be a marketer at Pfizer, right? I didn't want to have to leave to get that experience, but I just knew I had to wait for the right time. And so in that process, I said, okay, I've got to have these conversations. I got to reach back out to my board of directors, right? The people that supported me to get to this place. I had to reach back out to the hiring manager who initially, to be perfectly honest with you, wasn't trying to hear from me, right? Like it really took some intention to turn that relationship around. She became one of my biggest sponsors after that experience. I actually, now that I'm thinking about it, after that, I never had the opportunity to be a direct report of hers, to work for her as I would have if things had gone well with Viagra role. But in the rooms that I wasn't in, where talent decisions were being made, where merit increases were being made, that was a room where she was one of the loudest pro-Brittany voices, right? And I was so grateful for the time and the investment in turning that relationship around. But it didn't happen because I said, hey, I'm going to let my performance speak, right? Or, hey, I'm going to focus on what I need to focus on, right? I had to be intentional about the belief, the reputation, right? The story of me, my impact. And in this particular instance, what happened in this scenario and why I made the decision that I made, and then the lessons that I learned from it, right? And so I share that as a story with you to undergird what we will talk about today in the power of cultivating your leadership brand. It took about 18 months, went through several interview processes for different marketing roles, and ended up getting the one that was literally tailor-made for me, better in every way, from role to relocation package. And it was the right time for my family, right? And so it ended up working out. So let's talk about this new economy of leadership that we're in, right? Leaders now in this current state of our economy, this current state of our culture, this current state of the revolution of artificial intelligence and how it is shifting what daily business operations looks like inside of organizations and the role that human capital plays in that disruption, leaders are now expected to be more visible. Leaders are now expected to be more clear, more compelling, not just inside of your company, but also outside of your company, right? And AI has a lot to do with that, right? As a leader now, you aren't just bringing your intellect to the table, but you also have to be able to differentiate through connection. We're also in this shift because of the hybrid workplace, right? There are lots of organizations that have brought back their, back to the office mandates 4 to 5 days per week, and you might work in that type of environment. But if you work in a hybrid environment, or if you are still fully remote, right, you have less face time. So you're not getting those opportunities to run and bump in the hall with somebody, or, see somebody in the break room and decide to go to lunch together, right? So you have to rely on your digital presence more now because of hybrid work. Talent retention also is a contributing factor because people engage with leaders, not just logos, not just words on the wall, but actually people who are, again, building that human connection, differentiating through ways that you connect and build relationships. And then the workforce has shifted. So because the workforce has shifted, leaders must also shift. So I want you to think of it this way. Your leadership brand isn't self-promotion. It is self-awareness that you are able to express through intention, right? And that's what we're going to walk through today. So I want to share with you the leadership branding formula that we use at Career Thrivers. So when companies come to us and say, hey, we want to elevate the visibility, the leadership brands of our director, senior director teams, or, executives come and say, hey, I want to own my own development in this space to be better about how I'm showing up both within my organization, but also beyond it. Here's the formula that we use. Performance plus purpose plus presence equals your brand. So performance is, what do you do? What do you do? Right? If you want to jot some notes down, right? What are some of the results that you've garnered over the last 12 months? What is the impact that you're making through the work that you do? What do you specifically do? Right? And there's some layers underneath here. I'll say it that way, right? Because when you think about the performance of what you do, you can also think about a sub-bullet, the positioning of that, a simpler way, the words that you use to describe what you do, right? So for instance, in my marketing role, I'll stick with the same part of my story. I joined the Lyrica team, right? So Lyrica is a pain medication. I was working on the consumer digital marketing side was my role responsibility. So my role was, right, I was a consumer digital marketer for the Lyrica brand. But if I wanted to position the performance or the impact of my work, I might say I worked on campaigns so consumers could become aware of Lyrica to get back to doing things that they love to doing because Lyrica helped to ease their pain. Or I might say I worked on the Lyrica brand as a marketer, helping consumers understand how Lyrica could make their lives better, right? So think about underneath performance, how do you position? What's the language? What's the unique value proposition is like the super marketing jargon, but it is essentially how do you, in a clear, concise, and compelling way, communicate the so what of your job, right? If I had to say it the way that a fifth grader could understand it. So yes, you have this great title. Yes, you're a part of this team function department, but you work in that space in order to get to what outcome or what benefit and for whom, right? So that's how you can communicate your performance. Presence is about the energy that you bring to the work that you do. When I was a marketer, I will always remember the gift when I transitioned back to sales. So I transitioned back to sales. I have it up in my office to this day. And our agency of record and our team put together this beautiful picture frame of my results on the Lyrica team, but it wasn't just a bullet point listing. They mocked up a Vogue magazine cover with my photo on it. And around the cover, just like the cover of a magazine, were all of my top line, headline, so to speak, results. And then there was an article that like narrated my almost 2 years in that role. But they did that because it had a lot to do with my presence, right? I have always loved fashion, right? That's authentically who I am. I brought that to work, right? So they were tapping into these authentic layers of who I am because I brought that energy, that presence to the work that I did, right? So said another way, don't shy away from who you naturally are. Bring that, fold that into the work that you're doing, because it's not only how you differentiate yourself. I think we talk about that a lot because everyone wants to be unique, right? And that's important. But I think it also adds value because it's an additional layer and lens by which you see the world, right? In the way that you make decisions, and it speaks to some of your preferences, right? So the energy that you bring is about your presence. And then the purpose is, why does it matter, right? For me, it mattered that I learned the skill, the business competency of marketing, because I believe marketing is the hub of business. Right? If you don't know how to speak the language of the consumer, you're going to have a hard time making sales. And if you're not making sales, you do not have a business, right? So I wanted to learn that from some of the most brilliant people that I've ever had a chance to work with. Lifelong marketers, people that were in sales like me and came over to marketing, agency folks. Like I wanted to learn across stakeholders, consumer insight, experts, scientists in the space. Like I wanted to learn what marketing was really about, right? So what is the purpose behind the role you're in, the work that you get to do, right? And so all of those things connect to your brand, right? And so when we say brand, if I were to define the word brand as simply as possible, brand just means belief. And belief is much like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder, meaning you, right, as the leader, don't get to control what someone else believes, but you can cultivate what they believe, right? You can influence what they believe. And that's the part that you get to do, right? And that's the part that I want to help you with, right? So when we talk about leadership branding, it is essentially your perception at scale, because you likely have a sense of what your team thinks about you. If you don't, one of the tools that we love at Career Thrivers when we're working with our client partners is I like to preface and say a real 360 assessment, right? Meaning you have a quantitative and qualitative tool that can assess in an anonymous way what others think about you, right? What they believe about your work, your impact, your results, your attitude, your character, all of those things, but also specific competencies when it comes to 360s. But that gives you a picture of like what people that get to work with you, around you, different stakeholders, what they think about you. But you doing the work of leadership branding is you helping to influence that perception in a strategic way. So I want you to think about every email, yes, every meeting, every decision that you make, right? Every reaction that you have, all of those things contribute to your brand or the belief about you, right? All of those things contribute. So you want to be mindful, not in a way that stifles you, but you want to have enough emotional intelligence to be aware that branding is how people are consistently experiencing you, right? Not how you're experiencing yourself, not what you intend to project, but it's what others perceive. And oftentimes I do this because oftentimes there's a gap in between that, especially as you layer on different identities, right? Of who you are as a person. The natural bias that we all have, anytime a human is present, bias is present. Anytime a human is present. So even when we think about technology, humans create the technology tools that we use. So guess what's also present? Bias, right? So anytime a human is present, bias is naturally present. So that's another reason why it's important for you to close the gap between what you intend to project and what others perceive. And that is the work of leadership branding. You are actively closing the gap so that what you intend to project is what others perceive. So let's talk a little bit about the role of visibility. And when I say the word visibility, I think of people like Oprah, Bozoma St. John, Carla Harris, people like that come to my mind that are, these massive brands. Martha Stewart, Beyonce, you say the name and it's like all these pictures and thoughts and beliefs come into your mind. And I think as a leader sometimes, right, you're like, well, I'm not trying to be a celebrity. I'm not, and that's okay, right? But your visibility as a leader does matter. It becomes a catalyst for how you influence other people, how you inspire other people. So you have to be findable. It's really good if you're findable, right? If I can, if you pulled up a Google search right now, if you pulled up your browser, Google's my preferred browser, and you typed in your first and last name and you click enter, what comes up? Go ahead. I'll give you a couple seconds. Go ahead. Google your first and last name right now. Entrepreneur, whether you are a corporate professional, whether you work in nonprofit, government, if you put your first and last name into a Google search, what comes up? If you put your first, middle, and last name into a Google search, what comes up? Your online presence is your leadership presence. Because most people, when they go to learn something about someone or they want to inquire about, who is this person that I'm about to meet with, or who is this person that's sitting on this board with me, or who is this person that I met at a networking event, right? They Google your name. And so you want to know what comes up in that search engine, right? Now, when we think about, we're a little technical here. When we think about search engine optimization or the SEO around your name, if you have a website or something like that, or a blog, all of those things help. But let me help you with what is probably the number one best SEO strategy for your leadership brand. LinkedIn. And they're a client of ours, but they're not paying me to say this right now, right? LinkedIn, I say this often. I don't care, especially entrepreneurs, I don't care if you sell cookies or consulting. It doesn't matter what your product or service is, you need to be on LinkedIn for the search engine optimization alone. And especially if you want to work with businesses, right? Or you want to work with bigger organizations or executives, because those buyers, the decision makers, are on that platform. They're not on the other ones, but they're on that platform. And when your name is Googled, your LinkedIn page is one of the first things that comes up, your personal profile, right? Even if you have a business, right? Have a really, really strong LinkedIn profile, right? There's some data actually from LinkedIn that reports that visible leaders attract top talent 3 times faster. So this isn't just for entrepreneurs and business owners. As a hiring manager, you also need to have a presence on LinkedIn. You need to have an updated profile, an optimized LinkedIn profile. We work with leaders on building out their LinkedIn profile in an optimized way, making sure that it is not a regurgitation of your resume, but it is an SEO rich, almost sales page of you. So before someone meets you or after they meet you, they're able to click on your LinkedIn profile and get a very clear picture of who you are, the impact that you bring, those 3 Ps, right? Your performance, your presence, the energy that you bring, and your purpose. You want those 3 things to speak really loudly through your LinkedIn profile, and it becomes something that's speaking for you when you're not speaking, right? And that's the way you build that scale, right? And so you really, really want to think about how you're showing up in the online space, and LinkedIn is a great place to start. You may not have a personal website yet, and that's okay, right? Everyone doesn't have a personal website. Everyone may not even need a personal website. We believe at a certain level, most leaders should think about it, especially if you are wanting to do other things, like if you ever want to write a book, or if you ever want to do anything that is you monetizing your expertise in a strategic way. Then having that personal, essentially digital real estate for your leadership brand is a good way to go. So let's talk about some of the rules of leadership branding. What are some things that you could be doing to really help you? And these are things that we use with leaders that we work with in managing their leadership brands. 1, you want to prioritize clarity over complexity. Or I have a mentor that says, how does she put it? Essentially, don't be too cute in your language, be clear, right? It's the same thing as when you think about, using jargon, like you want to use simple language. Because if someone can't explain what you do back to you, they can't refer you. The same is true within your organization as it relates to your impact. So when you think about, hey, this is what's on my IDP. This is what I want to experience at this organization as it relates to my career progression over the next 1 to 3 years. And you may have a lot of details and specifics on that document, on that individual development plan, which is fantastic. But when you go to communicate that to your leader's leader or your leader's leader's leader in your skip level meetings, right? You need to be able to communicate that clearly so that when you walk away from that meeting, that leader, that more senior leader, knows exactly how to plug you in to the next level vision for the organization, or how to, which strategic projects to invite you to be a part of, because they know, because you've been very clear, exactly what you do and exactly what you want to do at that organization, right? It's not 10 things, it's 1 to 3, right? And they can help you get there. Consistency over intensity is the other rule that we share with executives when we are working with leaders on their leadership brand, right? Brand is built through trust. Trust is built through repeated behavior, not big moments. So when you think about, okay, what might this look like for me? Let's go back to this very practical recommendation with your LinkedIn profile. Maybe you say, hey, as I move into, this quarter, the next quarter, however you're thinking about this, I want to kind of start sharing some of my thoughts on leadership, or some of my thoughts on marketing, or some of my thoughts on operations or sales, or whatever, business function you represent. And you might say, okay, I'm not quite ready to create my own content. So maybe once a week, I'm going to share an article that I'm reading about the topic. Right? So that's not you creating content, but it's you developing a consistent rhythm of sharing something related to your area of expertise that now people can associate you with, so it builds your brand, right? The third one is authenticity over aesthetics. And we talked a little bit about this, right? So a polished brand is nice, but a true brand voice is powerful. And that gets back to that presence. The sub bullet under that presence is really you being really locked into who and how you are, right? So your identity, and making sure that you are bringing that into the work that you get to do. So how do you build your leadership brand? Well, one, you want to define your signature identity. What do people ask you for? What are your strengths? What are your areas of expertise? What problems do you solve? Right? You want to develop that signature identity. What's the energy that you carry? And you can learn these things through two ways: introspection and feedback. And I would say, especially if you have, a bit of a working track record, your mid-career, more senior career, start with the introspection first. Like, start with you actually thinking about some of these questions, jotting down your reflections, going back and actually, even if you have to go back into, that achievements folder, right? Or, some of your recognition or awards, right? I was gonna say some of your receipts, but yeah, all of those things, right? Looking back through however you categorize those, and I hope that you categorize those in a really great way, in a really organized way. And then thinking about, okay, these are the 2 to 3 bullet points that I would use to describe who I am, right? Who I am and the impact that I make in the work that I get to do. And then validate that through the feedback. Then go do the 360 or go do the survey, right? And make sure that that's aligned. Then you want to show up consistently, not just offline, but also online. Your LinkedIn presence, communicating your wins in those weekly meetings. Are you speaking up with your team, right? Just because people know you doesn't mean they know everything about you, especially as it relates to the work that you get to do. Most people, including your manager, have no idea what you spend the majority of your time doing. This is an honest podcast, right? We tell the truth over here. I know leaders want to be able to say, oh yeah, I know. No, they don't know. No. Why? Because they have 10, 20 other people, right, that they're leading. So your job, when you get into the one-on-one, right? Sure, build rapport, have connection, give updates, right? But also talk about your impact. Talk about your wins, talk about your lessons learned, talk about those things that were mistakes or development opportunities, right? Really own those meetings to really show up. Thought leadership, speaking up in rooms. Don't just be at the table, be a contributor to the brain trust in the room, right? And leading your meetings that you might lead with clarity, right? And then you want to be strategic about how you communicate that value externally. Last but not least, I want to wrap up with this: why branding matters for the organization. Because we've talked a lot about what this can look like for you individually as a leader, but all of this ladders up to leadership branding being a business strategy. Because the storytelling, and that's really what we're talking about here. We're talking about the story of you, your career story, your leadership journey, how you communicate that. All of that points back to the employer's brand. Strong leaders are indicative of strong businesses. When you have a strong business, people want to work at strong companies, right? And people want to stay. So when you think about the recruitment and retention strategy of the organization, a lot of it has to do with, and a lot of those efforts, to be quite honest, could be replaced with, dollars included, with leveraging storytelling as a employer branding strategy by leveraging the leadership brands of your people. And when we think about that at Career Thrivers, we believe that that's the future. We believe that there is a very near future of this language and word and world of influencer marketing tapping into like influencer talent management, right? And not from this perspective of like being on social media all day, but being able to leverage leaders that know how to communicate their impact in a clear, concise, and compelling way, and that being a vehicle for business growth on the talent side and the business operations side. And that's exactly why companies hire Career Thrivers. It's exactly why individuals hire us, to help you hone that leadership brand. First, identify what it is, but then really cultivate it, right? Within and beyond your organization, and to help organizations cultivate strategically across, right, their leaders, so that they're elevating their business. So if there is any way that we can support you or your organization, make sure you check out the resources that will be connected to this episode at letsthrivetogether.com. And remember, if you are not cultivating your leadership brand, you are giving permission for someone else to do it for you. I'll see you on the next episode. Quick question. Do you know the difference between a personal brand and a leadership brand? Most people don't, and it actually matters. Now, your personal brand is what people think about you. Your leadership brand, though, that's about the impact that you create. It's how you lead. It's how you think. It's your philosophy, the change that you're making visible in the world. I have a gift for you because each week I teach an absolutely free class called the Leadership Brand Class, where I walk you through our leadership brand methodology. We help you close the gap between the impact that you are already making in your career and your business and how visible that impact actually is. Because here's the truth. Visibility without substance is just noise. But impact without visibility, that's a missed opportunity. And most leaders that we work with are on the wrong side of that equation. So join me at leadershipbrandclass.com. It's free, it's every week, and it will change how you think about your leadership and how others think about you so that you're compensated for the impact that you actually create. You're listening in to the Let's Thrive Together podcast powered by Career Thrivers. Career Thrivers is a workforce development and leadership branding firm where we work directly with organizations, helping you with your organizational development strategy, but also your learning and development as you are building your next level leaders. If you are looking to retain top talent, inspire your leaders, or cultivate the leadership brands as executives within your organization, then make sure you head on over to careerthrivers.com to learn more about how you can work with us.